Who thought this day would actually come? Not me. I did not think that in 2019 I would actually be reading a sequel to Call Me By Your Name. This has really nothing to do with Call Me By Your Name specifically, but I'm usually team don't do a sequel. I love standalones, and the worst thing for me is just like an unnecessary sequel. And so I obviously was very nervous to read this, very mixed feelings going in. We knew ahead of time that it was going to be following the father's perspective, Samuel. Obviously, Elio and Oliver would be part of it a little bit. I was definitely one of those people. I read Call Me By Your Name at the end of 2017, and I saw the movie the day that I finished the book. It was my favorite thing I read that year. I absolutely adored it. Watched the movie many, many times. Made a long video about both of them. Weirdly look like a different person in that video. When the movie was happening, everyone kept asking for a sequel, and it was largely because we wanted to see Timothée Chalamet and Armie Hammer together again. I get it, but also just like reading the book, it's like there's no way this could be a sequel. We already shoot forward into the future. It's pretty conclusive. Now, if you haven't read Find Me yet by Andre Aciman, I would say, just my general recommendation before I spoil anything, is that it's worth your time if you're a fan of Call Me By Your Name. It's a very short read. It's like 260 pages. It's a one-sitting sort of read if you're the kind of person who can do that. I am not, but I did read it the day it came out, and that's pretty unheard of for me. So you can do it, and it is worth your time. If you want a little bit more of a spoiler, not even spoiler, because like I said of Call Me By Your Name, it's the kind of book that's really difficult to spoil because it's just about experiencing it. It's about like the characters and the prose, and that's what the experience of Call Me By Your Name is. There's really not much to spoil once you know the premise. Find Me, I guess there's a little bit more of a, like, does it happen element. So the book is split into four kind of sections. For the first half, we're with Samuel, Elio's father, while he's on the train to Rome to visit Elio. The only Elio we get in this whole section is Elio on the phone, and we barely even, like, see his dialogue. It's just, like, he cancels on his father, and then his father is falling in love with this woman on the train. Half of me reading this section was like, am I really reading the sequel to Call Me By Your Name and it's a straight romance the entire time? The other half of me was like, this is really beautifully written and I'm really enjoying this. And also, I listened to some of the audiobook and it's narrated by Michael Stuhlbarg, who played the father in the movie, and we all know he had the beautiful speech that made so much of the movie. I was fine being with him. It was very interesting to read insights on age like this, and I was somewhat sold. In part 2, we're with Elio again. Elio is falling in love with this man, Michel, and it's 15 years post Oliver, so he's in his mid-ish 30s. I loved learning how Elio had ended up falling in love with his a childhood friend. They've all been through quite a bit since we last found them. So like reading this as a sequel, it feels weirdly intrusive. Like we're not supposed to see characters this far later. It felt a lot like reading Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, because like we're not supposed to see Harry, Ron, and Hermione way older with children. And now Oliver has kids too, and he's going through it also in his own very short chapter at the end. There's one final section that is a little more brief, and I will let you guess what happens there. Now, I'm gonna just like not worry about spoilers from now on. What a weird time reading this book. I did have a good time. I kind of adored it while I was reading it. Andre Aciman's writing is just so stunning. Call Me By Your Name like blew me away. And Find Me, it's different. There are multiple perspectives. We shoot through time differently than we did in Call Me By Your Name. It weirdly feels like the scope has opened up, but the book itself is a distillation of the kind of specifics that we had in Call Me By Your Name, with it focusing on these like few weeks, months in the summer. Just sort of weird moments were my favorite ones, like Elio talking about the cadenza. I liked when Samuel and Miranda were in the sacred like museum sort of thing. The ending was very sweet, like just lots of I'm like, was this ending different from Call Me By Your Name? Like do we Do we not know the same things? I don't know. It's just not, it's not black and white like that. It just never has been. I read this interview with Andre Aciman where he talked about how the sequel was always in him, but like having the film out there gave him the courage to actually write it, and it showed him that people did care about these characters and would want to see what happened, and that like he wasn't influenced by the film. He just like used that as, you know, self-encouragement. I think he was totally influenced by plenty of things in the movie. He references Hephaestion, Alexander's lover, in Find Me. I don't remember if he did that in Call Me By Your Name. If he did, that's embarrassing for me, but I was pretty sure that reference came from Sir John Stevens in Mystery of Love. I stopped dead in my tracks because I was walking around listening to the audiobook when Elio mimicked Michel. And it just takes you right back to that moment in the movie when Timothée Chalamet mimicked Oliver. And that part was improvised. Of course you were thinking about your actors and Luca Guadagnino when you were writing this book. Andre Aciman. There's a part where Oliver says, "Feel something I still do." And it took me back, especially hearing it from Michael Stuhlbarg's narration. It just reminds me of the monologue in Call Me By Your Name where he says, "Feel something you did." Now Oliver's saying, "Feel something I still do." The fact that after all of these years, they're looking back at this wasted time, but this wasted time is exactly what they were afraid of when it was happening. Where is the world where that time was not wasted? They knew exactly that this would happen when they said goodbye. Maybe they knew that they would come back to each other. Maybe Oliver was too proud. Maybe not. Maybe Elio was not mature enough. They needed to live a life and realize that, I guess it really was that thing when I found it. So when we keep coming back to this idea of Find Me, they say this title quite a bit. I thought it made a lot of sense and was really beautiful. There's a lot of ways you could take it. Oliver narrates, "Find me," he says. "I will, Oliver, I will," I say. He's calling him by his name. Or has he forgotten? No! This book for me was a balance of three feelings. A, this is a beautiful story on its own. Both Samuel's and Elio's, and I guess Oliver's, how brief as it is. B, the moments that brought us back to Call Me By Your Name and sort of just like tugged on that nostalgia. You know, oh gosh, it makes me feel like I read Call Me By Your Name decades ago, and I read it less than 2 years ago. I don't know. And then just like, am I wasting my time? What are we doing here? I don't know what else I would have wanted from a sequel. Well, Call Me By Your Name is like an earth-shattering, one of my favorite books of all time. This is just like, it's almost, it just feels like a little novella, like an experiment after it. It does nothing to Call Me By Your Name for me. It does not add to it. It does not take away from it. 17-year-old Elio and 24-year-old Oliver are not changed because of this. But I liked it. Could this be a movie? That is another question. I say it probably will be. And I'm very curious about that because Ellie and Oliver are much older, as is Samuel. So the actors aren't older, and Timothée Chalamet's career has blown up. Obviously, he would do it. But how? And when? If it doesn't happen in the next 2 years, it will happen in the next 20 years. We can all rest assured. Probably with James Ivory, probably with Luca Guadagnino, and definitely with the actors. So that's gonna be a doozy, and I'm here for it. There's a sentence in Oliver's chapter about how artists do not know answers, artists know questions only, which is a huge theme in Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke, which I said in my video about Call Me By Your Name last year, that reading that book reminded me of Letters to a Young Poet. Did you follow that? So that was just one of those like stop in your tracks moment for me where I was like, how is this book and these words, how are they doing this to me? If you've read Find Me by Andre Aciman, please leave your comments below. I'm dying to discuss. I feel like I have nothing to say, even though clearly I have lots to say about it. Please tell me your thoughts, and I want to respond to them. Really inspired by like a lot of the words in this book. The idea of like the autonomous me. Early on in the book, like that was something that really stuck out to me. I always end up writing things down when I'm reading his books, and I think that's a really good thing. Those are my thoughts on Find Me by Andre Asaman. My name is Tiernan. I talk about books and life. Please subscribe. I have some good stuff coming your way before the end of the year. You don't want to miss out. Have a good one.